Good evening. My name is Dr. Elliot Malamud. There is a general sense in the Orthodox world that we live in a time of unprecedented opportunities and choices for Jewish women in the realm of Torah study as well as in communal leadership, including choices about the rabbinate, involvement in communal prayer, and other domains. Now, discussions about these matters throughout the community are often passionate and even heated, a testimony to the significance and centrality of the issues involved. The evolution in women's role goes back decades. As one of our distinguished panelists, Professor Freemer, has correctly asserted, quote, many of the innovations that are taken for granted today, including women's prayer groups, Megillah readings, Hakafot, recitation of Birkat HaGomel and Mourner's Kaddish, women on shul boards, and Gemara Shirim were already put in place at Harvard Radcliffe Hillel in the early 70s during his time as the Orthodox rabbinic advisor there. Two things that are well known, nonetheless, should be recalled in this regard. Number one is that these innovations are not taken for granted by all within Orthodoxy, not even all within modern Orthodoxy. And secondly, is that recently the ante has been upped. More dramatic changes are being pushed for, and just as vociferously opposed in this realm. From the reality of partnership minyanim, in which women lane, are given aliyot, and lead selected parts of the service, to the skirmishes over the possibility of women assuming some kind of rabbinic position, we are now voyaging, from a sociological standpoint, in somewhat uncharted oceans in Orthodoxy. To that end, we felt it would be timely to address these issues, and I cannot think of four people better suited to help us navigate these waters. We will begin our discussion by briefly discussing the changes that have occurred and then move on to some analysis of specific hot points in the debate. Women laning and being called to the Torah. But we will also move past these specific items to address the very notion of halachic change in modern Jewish life, especially change spurred by feminist considerations. I would like to introduce this evening's panelists, moving from this end to that end. Rabbi Dr. Daniel Sperber studied for rabbinical ordination in Yeshivat Kol Torah and earned a doctorate from University College London in the departments of Ancient History and Hebrew Studies. He is currently professor of Talmud at Bar Ilan University and serves as the rabbi of the Menachem Tzion Synagogue in the Old City of Yerushalayim. Rabbi Sperber's publication record in Jewish studies, of course, includes Minhagei Yisrael, Origins and History, on the character and evolution of Jewish customs. He won the Israel Prize in 1992. He has written extensively on the topic of inclusion of women in certain ritual services, especially in his work, Darka Shel Halacha, Kriyat Nashim B'Torah, Prakim B'Mediniyut Psika. An English translation of much of that book can be found in this volume, Women and Men in Communal Prayer, Halachic Perspectives. Rav Sperber is married to Chana Magnus, originally of Highland Park, Illinois, and they have 10 children, and they live in the Rova of the Old City. Rabbi Dr. Aryeh Frimer is the Ethel and David Resnick Professor of Active Oxygen Chemistry at Bar Ilan University. He received his rabbinical ordination from Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael and completed his doctorate in organic chemistry at Harvard. While a graduate student, he was appointed Assistant Hillel Director, serving as rabbi to the Harvard Radcliffe Orthodox Minyan from 1969 to 1974. Upon completing his PhD at Harvard, he became a postdoc fellow at the Weizmann Institute of Science before joining the faculty of Bar Ilan in 1975. Professor Frimer has published more than 125 scientific articles, reviews, and books in the area of active oxygen chemistry. But in addition to his scientific work, he has lectured internationally on various aspects of Jewish tradition and halacha, most prominently on religious Zionism and the status of women in Jewish law. He lives in Rehovot with his wife. They've raised 4 children and now have 11 grandchildren. Dr. Rivka Blau holds a PhD in English and Comparative Literature from Columbia and has taught English literature and composition at Fairleigh Dickinson University. She was the principal of yeshiva high schools in the New York area, high schools for women, for over 20 years, and is the author of a biography about her illustrious father entitled Learn Torah, Love Torah, Live Torah, Harav Mordechai Pinchas Teitz, the quintessential rabbi. Dr. Blau is the editor of the Orthodox Forum volume, Gender Relationships in Marriage and Out. Her husband, Rabbi Yosef Blau, is the Mashgiach Ruchani of Yeshiva University. They are the parents of rabbis Binyamin, Yitzchak, and Yaakov Blau. Rachel Berkovitz lectures in Talmud, Halacha, and the status of women in Judaism at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies in Yerushalayim. She spent many years studying Talmud and Jewish texts in both traditional and academic frameworks at such institutions as Midreshet Lindenbaum, the Shalom Hartman Institute, and the Hebrew University, in both the Talmud and Jewish education departments. She lectures widely in both Israel and abroad on topics concerning women and Jewish law. She's the editor-in-chief and halachic editor of Tashma, Jofa's Halachic Source Guide series. She's a founding member of Congregation Shirah Hadashah and has lived in Yerushalayim for the past 2 decades, and is the author of Boy-Girl Twins, age 10, and a daughter, age 6. Please welcome our panelists. I wanted each of you very briefly to describe what you see in a positive sense as the most significant change that has occurred in the realm of women in Judaism in your adult lifetime.
I don't think I have to say anything. I think you said it all. I think that fairly recently, in the last couple of decades, finally, women have become, I think the word is empowered. I think that's the word that people use, empowered. Halachically, religiously, they now are permitted to learn Gemara. They are now permitted to learn Halacha, and many of them do, and many of them are extremely learned, like Rachel Berkovitz as an example. And also in the area of synagogal ritual and Jewish leadership, women are beginning to come into their own, and they're no longer relegated to some sort of secondary position merely behind the mechitza.
To my mind, the greatest change, as intimated by Rabbi Sperber, was the high-level education that women have gotten, which clearly started with Sarah Schneer between the World War I and World War II, but around the 1970s, when women started learning Torah Shebaal Peh, and this accelerated into high-level education with the Toranot Rabbaniyot and with the Yotzot Halacha. I think this has been one of the most exciting changes, which has really opened up women to be part of the halachic discussion. I would just like to mention one point, and that is that a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. What I've been talking about is women with high levels of education. But whether we're talking about men or women, what we need is high-level education. A little bit of education suggests to one that they know enough to paskin for themselves, and that's not always correct.
I find it interesting that we're talking about something that has become formal and communally available that has been around for hundreds of years. In learned homes, women always learned. In fact, I am named for a great-grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka Rabinovich, Zichrono Livracha, whose answer to a Shaila was published in Yagdil Torah in 1885. So I hardly think that we just started learning now. It's just that it was in learned homes, where Gemara was the whole conversation, where learning was the way of life. That has now been extended. You don't have to be Bruria David, the daughter of Rav Hutner, in order to learn Gemara. You don't have to be Atara or Tova Soloveitchik, the daughters of Rav Yosheber Soloveitchik, in order to learn Gemara. The question when Atara was getting married was where was she going to find a lamdan big enough to be an equal partner to her. Thank God that she found Rav Yitzchak Twersky, Zichrono Livracha. So this is not something that's an innovation. What's an innovation is that what is now widely available used to be limited only to learned homes. And I think it's wonderful that it's now widely available and that you can now go to a school and you don't have to depend on having a father, a husband, or a brother who is willing to teach you. I also think that formal Jewish learning began before Sarah Schneer, and we should give attention to the schools that were in Kovna, in Ponevezh, in Telz, way before Sarah Schneer started working. So I think these have been forgotten, and we should be aware that there has been much more going on for much longer than we realize. I think there's always been a desire on women's part for learning. I think that has changed now. What has changed now is that it's widely available. Anyone who wants to learn can find a program and can start learning, and that's a great thing. That means more attention to halakha, more careful observance of halakha. That means that we have toanot in the Batei Din. It means we have yoatzot halakha, and I know that my daughter-in-law, Noah Jesselson, is on the kav, is on the line, 2 nights a week for 3 hours at a time, answering questions from all over the world in Taharat HaMishpacha. And I think it's great that she went through a 2-year program, she and tens of other women, and are now able to answer those questions. Those are good things that have been happening. I think this is an elitist discussion in one respect. We're talking about 10% of the population that cares about Torah learning. Within that percentage, a very small percent is getting the advanced education that we're talking about. And I think we really have to think through to ourselves, what are we doing? There's a group called, just let me see what the name of the group is. I just watched their website. It's called Moving Traditions. They're the ones who invented It's Rosh Chodesh, it's a girls' thing. Now they're trying to think what to do for boys. Since in 90% of the Jewish population, boys are running away from Jewish involvement as quickly as they can. And there's a whole question in the conservative reform movements, what did we accomplish by bringing women into such prominent positions? Somehow men went out the other door. So we have to think to ourselves, we have to be very deliberate in what we do. We have to think very carefully. We want women to learn. We want women to have positions of leadership, and a great deal is going to have to change in the Orthodox community in this respect. But we have to think through very carefully before we make a change, and any halachic change, we have to open to the discussion in learned Torah circles that halachic discussions deserve. It's not one person saying something. It has to be a big discussion of all the Talmidei Chachamim and Talmidot Chachamot before we make a change.
Okay, I'm clearly the youngest one on this panel, and so I can't actually say that Talmud Torah was the biggest change in my lifetime because I grew up in Boston and went to Maimonides and was in a co-ed Gemara shir, and it wasn't until I came to Israel that I found out that women weren't allowed to learn. The first person I spoke to who told me you're not allowed to learn Gemara, I thought he was pulling something, like he was joking. I had no idea what he was talking about. I couldn't believe such a thing existed in Judaism, so I can't say that as the biggest change because for me that was always part of my life and I assumed that Torah learning was always open to women. The thing that I can say is that I have seen a change about the value and emphasis placed on this. I think that Torah learning for women is now assumed that of course any good girl is going to go and learn for a year in Israel. I think that nowadays, at least in the communities that I'm from, when girls have a bat mitzvah, they learn something and they produce a Dvar Torah or a Siyum or something. I did not have a bat mitzvah. I did nothing. I had a sleepover. There are many higher level institutes. When I was thinking about going to Israel, there were only 3 places in Israel where a woman could learn. Now there are tens, if not 100, I don't know, many, many places where women can learn. So I think, and I really think it's being validated. I hope that guys who are learning in yeshiva, when they're looking for a partner, one of the qualities they're looking for is a woman who takes Torah learning seriously. And I think that that sort of has changed. This is something we look at as a value and an expectation in women, and that I think is central. The second thing I want to say, and I'll say it quickly, is that I think that more Torah learning leads, you mentioned this, to more serious mitzvot observance. And in my lifetime, I've seen women take davening more seriously in the modern Orthodox world. I've seen women take mitzvot that they're exempt from. There are more lulavim in my shul than I've ever seen before. I used to be a lone lulav, not just in my shul, but when I go to visit my relatives, there are more women performing those mitzvot. And I think that when you learn Torah seriously, you want to do mitzvot, and you take that more seriously, and I think that is enriching the entire Jewish community.